Hi everyone, and welcome back to Friendly Tech Chats. In this episode, we'd like to do something different because we've gotten quite a bit of feedback about our videos, and we'd like to go through the comments and maybe discuss the points that were raised, our opinions on them, and uh, thank as such a way, thank you for your direct engagement. I would say. So, Mikla, will you kick it off?
Yes, let's go from the very beginning. So when we just started,
Yes.
the first comment was from Jacco Kulman, who said, "Great discussions. We'll be back with my feedback later." Jacco, thank you very much for your comment. It's the comments help us. We appreciate it. We're
Yes.
still waiting for your comment. We're still waiting for your feedback.
Definitely, I did a hackathon with Jacco once. I think that's what I know him from, and I'm quite eager to hear what his opinion is. I think he just started vlogging like last week as well, so that could be interesting
If
input.
you find a link or something to this vlog, we can add here to the list.
Okay, so I'll take the uh, next one from Kinson Michel, one of our colleagues at Bol.com. Great discussion. I fall somewhere. Oh yeah, and this was on the unit test versus integration test.
Mm-hmm.
We're in the beginning of the friendly tech chat saga.
Yes.
So he said, great discussion. I fall somewhere in the middle. One thing I realized so far is that integration tests tend to get pushed back in priority discussions.
Part of the problem here can be that we differentiate integration tests and unit tests by the technical definitions. Whereas if we go back to the roots of the testing, those are just tests. So maybe we should not even make a distinction when we're talking about priorities between integration and unit. That, of course, depends on the team, on the situation, and what you mean by the integration test. Because by integration test, I usually mean still developer test, still test in isolation, but spending a little bit more. So for me, if I'm talking to my product owner, I'm not talking in the terms of, oh yes, I need to have to spend that much time for unit tests, and I need to spend that much time for integration tests. I talk about honestly, I'm not even talking about tests because that's part of my I'm doing TDD. But if I need to talk about rewriting or changing something in the test, I will be just saying this is a test. I'm not. I don't think it's fair or not fair. It's just the way I prefer to structure my work.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's I honestly don't think that a feature is done if it's not automatically tested in some form, unless you're really talking proof of concept code. Uh, I think having automatic validation of a feature is part of the definition of delivering a feature, uh, because that's the only way to guarantee or not guarantee, but to maximize the possibility that this feature will keep doing what it needs to do. And then, if for some reason I would only want to write one test, that would be an integration test. So I think having a testing part of the development uh, definition kind of should solve that priority discussion.
Although it would be in any case a warning sign for me when these things are deprioritized. Whether the question is here whether the business is micromanaging technical deliveries, or maybe the technical team is over engineering and that's why losing the trust of the business stakeholders to take good decisions and to stay on the high level of discussion. Because at the end, usually you don't want to get into those small nitty gritty, which test do we put into sprint, which test do we don't put into the sprint, right? You want to stay on the level of the features. And when you start to sacrifice some parts of the technical delivery, which technical teams think that they make sense and they should be delivered. Another thing, if it's again a cargo cult, and the team itself is not really convinced that it's bringing enough value. But if team sees value in things that it needs to be done, but it's consistently sacrificed, that's also a little bit of a warning sign.
And you call it warning signs, but in essence, it's basically just a process smell that you can use to improve your process, right?
To improve your process, although in my experience, usually direct attempts to improve this process rarely work, at least in the way I approach. So what I usually focus in building trust, and so
Right.
that these discussions are not even popping up because there is enough trust between the business and technical stakeholders.
Yeah, I agree. That is really important. How would you approach that?
Situationally.
Yeah,
But
no, that makes sense.
yeah, but usually, okay, how it worked for me so far is to engage the business stakeholders when they have a say in the decision process and explain maybe why some things are taking longer, why are we investing, why we might want to go a little bit slower now but build up the quality and things so on, to show the cost of shortcuts. And often it works, but it also helps to really focus and deliver quality or consistently more higher quality features and shows that you are not just doing for nothing it. But I think it's always a difficult question because I don't think there will be ever silver bullet answer for all the situations. It all depends on the
No.
context, on the history, on the dynamics of the team, business, and
Yeah.
so on. And sometimes there might be even valid reasons to just ignore everything and just move with YOLO to production just because it's really needed. Although most of
Yeah.
the time it's not the case.
Yeah, but I think the insight that a generic case of integration tests being pushed back in priority regularly might be a case of lack of trust between business and the development team. I think that's a really interesting angle.
Yeah, lack of trust, that can be lack of trust often, but not necessarily. Also another
No.
reason often I see is that it's especially in the startups or smaller teams that were starting, at the beginning you move very quick and you don't really need to pay necessarily the cost, and then when your scope starts to grow you start to move slowly, but because the business and also the developers, the technical teams, they got used to move things faster, they just start to cut corners. And
Yeah.
it's slowly building up to this culture of constantly just firefighting the previous decision and quickly pushing through the new ones. But okay,
Yeah.
that's an endless topic for discussions in different
No,
variations.
yeah, exactly. So thanks, Kinson, because you really gave us an interesting topic to discuss here, and I
Yes.
hope you enjoyed this.
Good. Let's move on to the next comment that was also 2 months ago on the same, I
Yeah.
think, episode from eballonews or eballonews because I think he's from Spain. I would like to talk about the mocks here. Yeah, at some point you still need to put a mock, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
like mocking a response from an API.
Yes, that's absolutely true. But I think the problem here is we're talking about these are the different kinds of mocks in a sense. And even though they might be built using the same technology, because you can mock using the same Mockito or mock in Java Vault, the driver that talks to HTTP, not to do the HTTP call. For me, the main difference is that external system, yes, that's what I want to mock, ideally as far as possible in my call chain, but no matter where. Whereas internal pieces of my functionality, by default, I prefer to mock as little as possible.
Yeah, it's black box versus white box essentially.
Yes. Well, it's not really even maybe black box via white box, but this is because I'm defining the boundary of my test. I'm focusing on the function of my application, my service. And there, for me, usually it's not, unless it becomes big and monolithic, I don't necessarily want always to focus on to split further. It might be useful, especially when you go to unit tests. I'm not saying that it's wrong, but usually it's very relatively easy to have all the pieces chained together and work with the real thing instead of mocking, because mocking is always a compromise. Mocking is always makes this break the chain of reasoning, saying, okay, here we assume that something is working this way. And with external system, it's, well, that's what we want, because we don't want to test the whole internet together or the whole environment of a big organization. That's why we're putting this line. But with our internal pieces of applications, internal modules, as long as they're easy to set up together, it's very beneficial to run them together, I think. What do you think, Bart, about that?
It's an interesting distinction, because like, what makes these external mocks different from the internal mocks? And you're correct in saying we don't want to test the internet, but there will still be bugs that arise from interactions between different systems.
Yes, there will be bugs, and that's why we might use other techniques like contract testing or testing on production and monitoring, even not testing, but just going into continuous testing techniques. Yeah, we should be ready for that. But it's always a question of convenience, where you get more benefit. Let's not go too much into details now, because I do think we need to have an episode with a couple of parts about really mocks. I think it deserves really. We've been talking about this from the very beginning that we need to do that.
Exactly. We've always said, mocks is an issue. Mocks is an issue. So we should probably just have one of these episodes.
Just really nail it.
Yeah, exactly.
Just for now, in this, just for this comment, yes, it's very much correct. We will need to put somewhere a line where we will start to say, okay, here coming our assumptions. It just when we have too many of those lines on every level within our main components, that's the problem that we're usually not very happy with the mocking.
Yeah. And why do you what's the biggest problem in one sentence
with mocking?
With that heavy internal mocking? Yeah,
the biggest problem is that your application, your tests become very fragmented and too much dependent on your assumptions on how your own code works, instead of just using the real code and seeing how it works.
You're tightly coupling your unit tests to your code architecture.
And the second also a big problem is when you try to change something, because then by mocking, you're hardwiring, you're hard coding into the test basically the behavior of your smaller components. And if you want to change your something refactoring, suddenly you have this ripple effect. That's also a big problem, and it can also even be a bigger problem than what I said. Because for me, I usually try to derive the behavior from my internal tests, at least internal behavior, to correlate what I saw in production or on some report with the test before I will start to fix it in a TDD manner. But another problem, indeed, what you're saying, that what we are coming to is that we can't have tests preventing us from improving the code, unfortunately. Changing the code.
One thing about what eballonews said that I wanted to go into is that the objective of testing is to give security for developers and prove that what we did works. And also, if something changes in the wrong way in the product, that we can easily detect. So he's talking about regression and quality assurance, I guess, right?
Yes, although it depends on the context, how you see, but I think it's also a very important question for discussion, why and how the test really helps the developer test us. Because I don't think, honestly, they necessarily give you, they do give the security, but not in the way that they will prevent you from making an error.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I wanted to go into this point, because I don't entirely agree with him here.
Yes, I think it's clear to this. It's a little bit nuanced difference, but I think it's important that it will not prevent you from breaking things, even all the way to production. And trying to use these testing techniques, automated or not automated, with a full prevention is dangerous, because it will make those tests incomprehensively expensive, and basically it will slow you down, and it will never guarantee you 100%.
That's also like the heart of the argument against a term like quality assurance. You can't ensure quality. You can strive for a certain amount of quality that should be in balance with the amount of quality that you need.
Yes. Yes. So I would rephrase it that for me, these tests, they prove in the first way that so that when we're doing a change, we achieving what we wanted to do. That's the most important. If we follow the TDD
Yeah.
before or after, I
Yeah.
don't really even care before or after TDDs,
No, yeah,
as long as
exactly.
it's TDD or some kind of testing this way. And the second,
Mhm.
then usually sometimes it can show me that I broke something. I didn't do it very properly, but it's not always where it always helps me if I do see that I broke or someone else broke or just some unexpected behavior somewhere in production. Then it allows me to narrow in very quickly, much quicker, when I have a good testing framework, testing setup.
Yeah.
To where exactly to reproduce the problem and to fix it,
Yeah.
usually within minutes, and deliver it
Yeah,
to
exactly.
production.
It's actually a really powerful debugging tool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it requires constant work with that. It's a little bit like a
Exactly.
fitness exercise. This is a little bit going back maybe to the first big question that we had about prioritization.
Mhm.
Not you never really need that integration test or test to deliver things. You can do it without, maybe with a couple hiccups and so on. It's more
Yeah.
about the fitness that I don't need to run to live, but in
Yeah.
order for my body to be helpful, to be resilient to sickness and so on, I need to do something, not just sit
Yeah.
and eat. And the same goes for integration tests and testings. It can be sometimes I'm spending more time on tuning my test suites, much more time than to do the production code. But at the end, because when things do hit the fan, when there is a
Yeah.
question, then I can react very quickly. And
Yeah, that's a really strong analogy with fitness. That it's much more about being ready for when you need it, and not so much about what you're adding now.
yes, and that's also another reason why it's a little bit difficult to sell, especially when the business is always wants something for the yesterday. In my also experience, usually the real sale with this build-up of trust was happening after a year or so, when the business say, well, you know what, now looking back, we're working much faster and much more different, and maybe
Yeah.
the other team next to you that are neglecting all those things that you guys are doing, even though it kind of takes more time, they are now moving much slower.
Yeah.
But okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I think you are right. We need to do a pause now to
Yeah.
take a
Yeah.
breath, because
Definitely.
it's already 20 minutes on my
Yeah. Exactly.
recording, and we don't want to
Yeah.
make the files too big.
All right. So thanks everyone. Those that we addressed in this episode. I hope you liked our discussion based on your input. Please keep giving us more input because we really love this back and forth. And we'll go into more comments next episode.
Thank you.